So now that you've established your financial goals, you've developed the financial literacy to make sure that your team is managed efficiently and effectively, you need to, well, go make money. You can protect your money, but if you have no money to protect, then what's the point? Here you have to find the glitches in the system. Money glitches. Money glitches are real, dude. I literally sit down with billionaires and these guys understand how to print money. There are money glitches, but these glitches have to originate from some sort of cause. Cause equals effect. And you can influence the effect through action, but you need to be able to figure out what is the cause of a problem and where can you provide a solution. There's a couple gaps in the marketplace, and I want to mention 4 of them. So in this concept of the money gap, the first gap between a person that has money and is willing to expend that money for something else is your access gap. People are willing to pay for access. So if you want to make money, you must be willing to provide access, to be a bridge, to be some sort of toll collecting system. It's extremely important because access is something that holds power. If you hold the keys, well, then people can pay you to get in the door. Access is important. So many people are willing to pay tens of thousands of dollars to get into an event, or pay millions of dollars to buy a specific vehicle that will give them access to a club, or donate millions of dollars to a nonprofit organization that will give them access to a special dinner with a billionaire that will give them access to a specific club or a room. If you want to gain access to high opportunities, you need to be able to find gaps. First gap is the access gap. The second gap is the time gap. People are willing to pay to save time. Aren't you? You wouldn't be willing to pay a premium for food delivery? You do. You wouldn't be willing to pay a premium for an Uber as opposed to waiting 10, 20 minutes, 30 minutes for a taxi, having to pay cash? You do. People are willing to pay for the time gap. That's why people fly in private jets. Most people don't fly in private jets just because it's comfortable. The plane itself, right? There's no real difference between a first class and a private jet. You're still sitting in a seat, but there's a time experience, right? There's a time gap that you're able to satisfy. So remember here, guys, the framework of this data set is now that you can protect your estate, you need to build your estate, so you need to make money. So you need to find these access points, these glitches, these anomalies in order to make money. You need to find these gaps. If you satisfy the market, if you're able to provide value for something that is missing, then you can make a lot of money. The next one is the information gap. People are willing to pay for premium information, whether it's Wall Street, whether it's governments paying for intel and paying spies and building organizations that build satellites to spy on different countries. People are willing to pay for information. I know this because I myself pay tens of thousands of dollars every single year for mentors and coaches and people that are willing to help me level up. Why? Because you're not just paying for information, you're paying for experience and knowledge and the ability to gain intel that will allow you to make better decisions. That's what you're paying for. You're paying for increased probabilities of success. People are willing to pay for money if you can provide access to good information. And the last one is your convenience gap. People pay for convenience. And convenient doesn't necessarily mean less time. Convenient means people are enjoying the process of buying your product, what you have to offer, how you sell it, how it's presented. It's just very convenient. It's very easy. It's very simple. That's why things like Apple Pay work extremely well, or for services like PayPal are very frictionless. Why? Because they're just convenient to use. They're very simple. If you can provide value and understand that there's a gap in convenience, like think about taxis, dude, so fucking inconvenient. Somebody provided the value of making that inconvenience disappear. Somebody solved that problem. And if you solve big problems, you make a lot of money. And you'd be surprised how much money there is in people having to save 10 minutes on a taxi, tens of billions of dollars and millions of rides a day. So this is just one example of the monetization possibility and opportunity that's connected with providing value and mitigating the distance and these gaps between the seller and the buyer. And of course, the objective, because ultimately, people are not buying a product. Hear me out when I say this. People are not buying a product or a service. They're buying the objective. Listen to me, behind the product, behind the service, there's an objective. Somebody could go into a dealership and buy a Lamborghini for 10 different reasons. Somebody could buy a Lamborghini to gift it to his wife. Somebody could buy a Lamborghini because he just became a millionaire. Somebody could buy a Lamborghini because he's so rich that he's just buying another day toy to give it to his son. How you approach these people, how you identify the gaps in these people's lives and provide value in that way is how you make the sale. It's not about the product, it's about your ability to solve the problem. So now that you're able to solve the problem, you have the team that is kind of managing your monetization and making sure that your money is safe. We talked about your team. Now that you have your financial goals, you have financial literacy to make sure that your employees are managed. Now that you're making money, well then, my friend, you need to multiply your money, which we will cover in the next data set. A person that works at McDonald's walks into the Louis Vuitton store. Right behind them, a person that owns a multi-million-dollar a year car dealership walks in right behind. They both go to the counter and they look at the wallets that are at display, the nice leather wallets. One looks at it, sees the price tag, it's $1,000. The other person sees the price tag, it's $1,000. One person looks at it and says, this is just so expensive. The person working at McDonald's looks at this, this is just egregious. The other person looks at it and says, oh, this is quite cheap. Only $1,000? Oh, wow. Yeah, let me get 2 of them. And actually, let me get 3. The second individual say, oh, what a greedy bastard. Why the hell does he need 3 wallets? The other guy can't even afford it. Well, I don't even want to consider that scenario. I want to look at the mindset of the situation. Because if you can understand the mindset, then you can understand the worldview, the philosophy. And if you can understand the worldview and the philosophy, you can replicate the actions that led the individuals to the lifestyle that they have based off of what? The worldview. Because the worldview dictates the actions dictate the behavior dictates the lifestyle, and the lifestyle dictates what you have in life. But it all starts with the mindset. So you have the mindset of a winner and you have the mindset of a loser. Now let me explain it because it has nothing to do with money. It has to do with how you perceive a situation. What if I told you there's no such thing as cheap or expensive? What if there's only rich and poor? What if that $1,000 wallet isn't expensive? What if you just don't have money? Now, I know this may sound crazy as a concept, but when you understand this concept, you realize that you can change money and morph money and multiply money extremely quickly by understanding the principle of multiplying your time capital. Now, your time capital at this current state, for most of you guys, is expended at a 1-to-1 ratio. So you spend X amount of hours and you yield X amount of dollars. Now, if you want to become wealthy, you want to be able to spend X amount of hours and you want to be able to create a trickle effect of money that has kind of like an echoing effect. You want to be able to get paid at multiples for your current investment or your current investment of time or effort, whatever it may be. But most people do not look at it that way. Now, why does the McDonald's worker look at that $1,000 wallet and say, this is expensive? The reason they say it's expensive, my friend, it's not because of the wallet. It's not even because of the price tag. It's because of the amount of time that it took them to make the $1,000 that will then lead them to acquire that purchase. So when they look at the wallet, they're not looking at $1,000. They're looking at all the hours and energy and time and effort that it took them to make that $1,000. Does that make sense? Now, the other individual that owns a multi-million-dollar car dealership, they didn't really have to work a whole lot for that $1,000. Therefore, they have no real appreciation for that money because they didn't really put massive amounts of effort towards it. I'm not saying that they don't appreciate the money. I'm saying the money just doesn't hold as much weight. Why? Because there's not as much time, energy, and attention attached to it. So in the multiplication of wealth, it's not just multiplying your investment vehicles, but not just multiplying your teams, but it's multiplying every area and growing every area of your life in a balanced, organized, and systemized fashion. Now, once I understood this concept and it really hit me, I asked myself, okay, now how can I buy things for the least amount of time possible? Not how can I buy things for the least amount of money possible and be a cheap ass, but how can I work the least amount of possible time and yield massive amounts of money? And what I came to realize is that one thing is to make money and another thing is to multiply. That's why in Capital Club's ecosystem, creating is one thing, multiplying is another mindset, and then preserving is a completely different animal in and of itself. So in the multiplication process, what you do is you need to find things, investment vehicles that are low risk, high reward. What does this mean? This means that you shouldn't be buying something, an asset class, when it's overvalued, clearly overvalued. When you look at the watch market, when a watch is 500, 600, 700% over its retail price within weeks of launch, that's overpriced. It doesn't take a genius to understand that that's an overpriced thing. Now, there are exceptions to the rule, but for the general rule of thumb, this idea of massive swings is not really common. So you need to be able to base your investments in your multiplication on what I like to call the winner's formula. Now, the winner's formula is very simple. I don't bet on products. This is my personal thing, guys. I don't bet on market cycles. I don't bet on real estate. I don't bet on speculation. I bet on people. And yes, there's speculation attached to people, but I bet on winners. So some people like to multiply their wealth by investing in companies. I like to multiply my wealth by investing in people. So how I do this is through my private equity firm. So yeah, I make money in the stock market. I make money in e-commerce, but that's just multiplying fiat. I want equity. If you want to build an estate like we talked about, you need to own. So in the multiplication process, it's about ownership. It's about ownership that gives you cash flow. And once I understood that I could stop trading my time for money and that I could really have anything that I wanted if I organized myself effectively and efficiently, then I began to work completely differently. It wasn't about how many hours I worked, because I was willing to work 40 hours fucking straight if it meant that it would yield 400 or 500 hours worth of return. It's all in proportion to what you're receiving. So once you understand this, it's not just about addition, but the multiplication vehicle comes from equity ownership. It comes from not spending your principal capital. Most people are out here spending their principal capital. Let's say you have your e-commerce store and makes $100,000 net profit in a year. You can't go and spend that money. That's not yours to spend, right? You need to figure out where that money is going to be going. You can pay yourself, but it's not yours to spend. In your corporate goals, financial goals, in your personal financial goals, or in your estate, not go out and spend it in the club. That's why most of you guys can't sustain wealth, because it's not just about making a ton of money. It's about multiplying it. Like I mentioned before, at some point you can't work, right? So you need money to be working for you. And the sooner your money works for you, the stronger it works, right? And the more consistent it gets and the more solidified it becomes. I've done it through private equity. It works, and it works extremely well. But finally, it's the preservation of wealth. And the preservation of wealth comes from a very simple process that I like to call longevity outlook. And longevity outlook is an exercise that I like to do on a daily basis where I look at the long-term picture. In social media, it's extremely easy to get saturated with what somebody else is doing in that day. You get FOMO that somebody bought a nice car, you want to compete. But when I look long-term, well, then I've established my estate goals and I'm just working towards filling up that nest. Why? Well, because you never know when shit hits the fan. You never know when something goes sour. And inside this ecosystem and this equation of creating, multiplying, and preserving your wealth, becoming financially literate, mitigating the risk that is associated with onboarding people into your plan by being educated and nurturing these relationships while simultaneously having the necessary goals and the predictable cash flow models, because you understand the gaps in the market that will give you the edge to provide value, well then, my friend, you're one step closer to becoming wealthy, healthy, successful, and financially free. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this equation that I've conjured up because, well, frankly, it's the equation that I use. And I think that it is replicatable, it is consistent, and by no means it is limited to one country or one perspective. You can take my model and adapt it and make it your own, but you need to be able to think long-term. Make your goals, build your team, be proactive towards action, be proactive towards making good decisions, not reactive decisions. Set your financial goals, hit your financial goals, build your estate, provide value to the marketplace, and you, my friend, well, you, my friend, will be very successful.